Now, when prospects of oil exploration promised accelerated economic development, the federal government wanted a coordinated national energy policy, but Sabah and Sarawak presented constitutional issues. Sabah and Sarawak said, hey, look here, you cannot take, what is belongs to us, because when we joined you, these are already our rights, so how can you take? And land is a state matter. What's land? Land is defined as anything that is found on the land and below the land, up to a certain depth, and above the air, up to a certain depth. It belongs to them, you cannot simply take them away. That is a very good argument. But before negotiations could take place, the state of national emergency was declared on 15th May 1969. And under these, various essential powers ordinance were passed to amend the Continental Shelf Act 1966 and the Petroleum Mining Act to apply throughout Malaysia. So by Section 3 of the Continental Shelf Act, they altered the rights of the East Malaysian states, Sabah and Sarawak. All rights to exploration of continental shelf and exploitation of natural resources shall be vested in the federal government. Now, then the same ordinance also caused mining ordinance of Sabah and the oil mining ordinance of Sarawak to cease to apply. But this, I must say, this ordinance, I said no, were not repealed. Sorry for the error. They were not repealed. Now, despite its importance, you will notice neither the Cobalt Report, IGC, nor the Malaysia Agreement, Malaysia Act 1963, discussed ownership of petroleum found onshore, offshore. They were all silent. There were already oil mining activities going on in Sarawak before that, right? But how is it? Cobalt Commission, IGC, or the Malaysia Act 1963 did not mention a word of oil or gas, because they assumed that since it's already belonged to them on the day they formed Malaysia, there's nothing to argue about. Now, disputes arose between East Malaysian states and the federal government over royalty payment in 1973 and 1974, and this was when the Petroleum Development Act was passed. What are the features of the Petroleum Development Act? It irrevocably vested in the National Corporation, Petronas, entire ownership in and exclusive rights of powers of exploring, exploiting, winning and obtaining petroleum onshore, offshore of Malaysia. The meaning of exploring, exploiting, winning is not defined. So we have got to go back to how it is used, what's the meaning in the petroleum industry. Now, in consideration for vesting of ownership, Petronas agreed on the separate agreements with the state governments to make cash payments, annual cash payments of 5% of sales proceeds won and saved in the state. Now, it is believed that the PDA was enacted when negotiations with Sabah and Sarawak governments failed. When negotiations failed, they passed the PDA so as to vest the entire petroleum reserves, because petroleum reserves are of strategic national importance. Now, there is this Territorial Sea Act 2012, which Sabah and Sarawak claim that they are unconstitutional. Now, but in compliance with the Geneva Convention on Territorial Sea and the Contiguous Zone 1958, the Convention 1958, the Emergency Ordinance number 7 was promulgated for delimitation of the territorial waters of Malaysia to 12 nautical miles, except for Sabah and Sarawak, not exceeding 3 nautical miles. Now, then as we know, Malaysia was under state of constitutionally speaking from 1969 until 2011. It was still under state of emergency. I think everyone forgot about it, I do not know. And then it was passed, it was annulled in December 2011, and the Territorial Sea Act was passed in 2012. Now, this was in compliance. Is the Territorial Sea Act 2012, as far as the federal government is concerned, it was complying with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, to which Malaysia was a signatory. Now, once Malaysia becomes a signatory to any international conventions or treaties, it has got to pass laws, enact laws domestically to give force to the convention. Malaysia, once it signs, it does not automatically become the law. Laws got to be passed. So the Territorial Sea Act 2012 was passed because Malaysia wanted to give effect to the UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, 1982. She's obliged to pass laws.
Obliged, but it took 22 years for them to enact the law.
Yes.
Which conveniently after the annulment of the emergency
Yes.
in 2011.
Correct. That is correct. Yeah.
There's a catch.
Because there is no time limit when they can enforce them. So long if they are signatory,
They need to be rectified.
they need to be ratified, yes.
When was it rectified?
Yes.
2012. 2012 is just passing passes.
That is
signed.
She signed it a long time ago. Now,
Rectification when?
yeah, I'll let you know later. Now, so this act was passed. Now, the ratification was also consistent with the provision in the Federal Constitution, because the Federal Constitution, I'll shortly tell you which paragraph, which article, empowers the federal government to give effect to them by passing laws in the Parliament. Now, by this, the Territorial Sea Act, it is limited to 12 nautical miles. All over the world, territorial, the breadth of the territorial seas of all coastal states in the world is limited to 12 nautical miles. After the territorial, territorial sea. After the territorial sea, I think for another 12 nautical miles, you have what is known as the contiguous zone. Then you have the EEZ, exclusive economic zone. Now, the exclusive economic zone coincides with the continental shelf, but it can go beyond, because the exclusive economic zone is only 200 nautical miles. So and the continental shelf is also the same width, but they can go beyond another 150 nautical miles, making it 350 nautical miles. After that becomes the high sea. The high sea belongs to the world at large. Next, by Section 3.3 of the Territorial Sea Act, for purposes of the Continental Shelf Act 1966, the Petroleum Mining Act 1966, National Land Code, and any written land law of Sabah and Sarawak. Sabah has got the land code, isn't it? Sarawak land code. Sabah has got the Sabah land ordinance. Reference to territorial sea shall not exceed 3 nautical miles. 4. The sovereignty over territorial sea and sea bay and subsoil shall be vested in and exercisable by the king. Is the sovereign authority. Now the critical question. Are the PDA and the Territorial Sea Act unconstitutional? Are they unconstitutional? Now, the contentions of Sabah and Sarawak that PDA is ultra vires the federal constitution is based on the following reasoning. Land, including land under water, is a state matter under the 9th schedule to the federal constitution. Therefore, the PDA infringes on our listing, therefore it's ultra vires. That is their argument. Next, you must understand this doctrine. Doctrine of eminent domain. That means it's a universally recognized doctrine. That is, the sovereign authority has the inherent right to compulsorily acquire property, any property for public use. That's the meaning of eminent domain. It was developed in India under this case, Chiranjit Lal and the Union of India. That is the basis of the law of acquisition. They acquire for public purpose. And the basis is this eminent domain.
Is it the same as the Article 83 of the?
Coming to that. There is a very strong basis for that. Okay. The next one. Now, what is the real basis for the Petroleum Development Act? Article 83. Most of us in our discussion, we tend to don't take into account Article 83, 1 of the Federal Constitution. This is what it says. It authorizes the federal government to require the state government to grant to the federal government or such body it may direct such land as it desires in perpetuity in the national interest. In consideration, we will provide for payment of the just annual rent for only the petroleum interest. So accordingly, Section 4 of the Petroleum Development Act provides for cash payment to the state whose petroleum resources are acquired. Now let me read to you interesting Article 83.
Let me interject a bit.
We will finish at 11, so I think shortly he's going to finish. Nick, can you also serve the cup and drinks for our guests? Please prepare questions in your hand.
Okay.
Get ready. You can write it and send to us as well.
Yeah, you can write it. Okay. I want to read this important provision. If the federal government is satisfied that the land in a state not been alienated land and is needed for federal purposes, the government shall, after consultation with the state government, require the state government, and it shall then be the duty of the state government to cause to be made to the federation or to such public body as the federal government may direct such grant of the land as the federal government may direct, provided that the federal government shall not require the grant of any reserve for a state purpose unless it is satisfied that it is in the national interest so to do. So it's a very wide power. Now, where in accordance with this clause, the federal government requires the state government to be caused to be made a grant of land in perpetuity, the grant shall be made without restrictions, I read, without restrictions as to the use of the land, but shall be subject to the payment annually of an appropriate quit rent, and the federation shall pay to the state a premium equal to the market value for the grant. And when the federal government so requires the federal to cause to be granted any other interest in land, the federation shall pay to the state a just annual rent. Therefore, at such premium, if any is required by the state government, as may be just subject, and there is a provision there. So therefore, what this article simply means is that the federal government can require any state government to relinquish their interest in the land and surrender it to the federal government for national interest.
What is national interest?
What is of entire importance? Oil, if I can say, is of national importance.
Why?
Because without oil, the whole machinery, the cogs cannot move. It cannot move. And oil is, once it is vested in the federal government, the argument goes that it will be used for the development of all the states. You can say that. You can say that is a. You are right. You can say that the oil revenue is not pumped back. You can say that. But that is the basis for them. I'm not here to defend the federal government's case. I'm here to say what could be the basis.
But is it
defined. What is national interest?
No, nowhere is it defined. Similarly, the even Sabah and Sarawak have the Land Acquisition Act, where the government can take your land for state interest. State interest is also not very clearly defined. In fact, there have been instances where they acquire your land, okay, for building hospitals, building schools. Those are of state importance, right? But they do not build. So after many years, maybe after 30 years or 40 years, they give it to a private developer to build condos. I do not know whether it has happened here, but it has happened in Sabah, it has happened in West Malaysia. But there is a new law that has developed that after some time, the land may not have been useful for that purpose. Building condos may have become, even low-cost housing, become more important. That is also of state importance, of national importance. So many ways that they can justify. Okay. What about the Territorial Sea Act 2012? Sabah and Sarawak contend that this act also seeks to alter their boundaries, and this is against Article 1.3 and 2B of Federal Constitution, which says that the state, the boundary shall be as on the day they join Malaysia. Now, the matter of sovereignty is subject to international law and treaty. Being a signatory to the UNCLOS 1982, Malaysia enacted the Territorial Sea Act as a sovereign state to give effect to the international treaty. Now, Article 76(1)(a) of the Federal Constitution allows the Parliament, this is the clause that I was talking to you about earlier, allows the Parliament to enact laws with respect to any matter enumerated in the state list for purposes of implementing any treaty or convention or any decision of an international organization of which the Federation is a member. So that was the basis for the passing of the the Territorial Sea Act 2012, because Malaysia is a signatory to UNCLOS 1982. So it has got to give effect domestically. So it was obliged under international law to pass that act. What you're saying after 22 years. Okay. Now let's see the state, Sarawak state's power to legislate under 2C of the state list. Sabah has not invoked its powers yet. Now, Sarawak, I must tell you, does not challenge the constitutionality of the Petroleum Development Act. It says Petroleum Development Act is valid. We are not challenging. That is the position that Sarawak took during the Petronas suit. But it hinges its right to impose on Petronas license fees on upstream petroleum activities under item 2C of the state list. So they say you have got the power to, legislative power to pass a law. What is that law? It provides the state, enables the state to legislate on matters pertaining to permits and licenses for prospecting for mines, mining license, leases and certificates. Its scope is limited and it has got no right of, it would appear, no right of exploitation which is reserved to the federal government under item 8J of the federal list. Only the federal government will make laws for exploitation. There is a difference between prospecting for mines and exploiting and development. I think it's interesting if I read to you the wider powers of the federal government under 8J. It reads as follows. Subject to state list 2C in the state list, development of mineral resources, mines, mining, minerals and mineral ores, oils and oil fields, purchase, sale, import and export of minerals and mineral ores, petroleum products, regulation of labour and safety in mines and oil wells are all matters for, much wider, all matters for the federal government, not the state government. So state government rights is limited to issuing permits for prospecting for mines. Now, what does prospecting means? Exploring, exploration, limited to searching and exploration. The development and mining rights are still vested in the exploitation and development are still vested in the federal government laws. That could be the reason why they did not want to challenge the constitutionality of the Petroleum Development Act. But they say this is our right, we want to pass laws. Okay, so it's limited. Now, as I say,
5 more minutes.
huh?
But try to 5 minutes so there will be more question Q&A. There will we have about 35 more minutes.
35 more minutes. Oh,
11, we finish it.
I'll finish it very fast, I promise.
But don't skip the bonding.
No, I won't. Then they will start, there will be more questions then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you try to understand the state powers, legitimate state powers, it must be understood, or you must have the background, okay? You hate that Article 82 of the Article 83(2) I just said to you. Once the federal government had caused the state government to grant in perpetuity such land as the federal government may direct under 83(1), Article 83(2) provides that the grant of the land under 83(1) shall be made without restrictions to the use of the land, only subject to payment of just annual rent. Since any state, state passed any state law, okay, passed under state law passed under item 2C would be ultra vires 83, the basis of PDA, and such law shall be void. So now, because this is my understanding, the under 83, it requires the state government to surrender relinquish its rights without placing any restriction. I leave it to you to say whether the act passed by the State Assembly under item 2C of the state list, whether it is a restriction or not. There is an argument which says that there is such thing as it is restricting the free use of the land that is required under 83. We just saw article item 8J of the federal list, that has got wider powers than the state under 2C. Then this legislative power we have seen really. Then okay, United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea 1982, the very important document in which Malaysia is a signatory, and being a signatory you must give effect to those laws. Now, international law only recognizes the sovereignty of the coastal state. International law does not recognize the sovereign rights invested in the state of Sabah or Sarawak, only in Malaysia. Article 76 of Voon clause says that the continental shelf is the coastal state's territory extending beyond its territorial margin by natural prolongation, as I explained to you, up to a limit, 200 nautical miles, and now up to a maximum 350. Now, so Article 77 of Voon clause recognizes coastal state sovereign rights for exploration and the exploitation of natural resources. Now, but this right given by the under international convention is not free, is not without restrictions. There will be the coastal states exercising sovereign rights shall not infringe the right of navigation, because once upon a time all these were part of the high seas and it belonged to the maritime nations at large. Anyone can use the. So even though you have the sovereignty, see the rights, the sovereign rights over continental shelf is quite different from the sovereign rights over your territorial lands. Territorial lands, you can stop people from coming into your land. In the continental shelf, you are the sovereign, but you have got to allow free passage of innocent passage, they call it. Then that you could allow other states, Indonesia, Philippines, China, to lay submarine cables and pipelines. Maybe Dr. Voon can later tell us whether laying of cables and submarines is part of the OBOR. One belt, one road. This morning I learned something that the one belt, one road includes the maritime areas too. Okay, then the exploitation beyond 12 nautical miles is subject to annual payments to the international body called the Authority, AUTHORITY, which governs the resources of the high seas. Now, let me very briefly go through the case laws in the other federal constitutions. Australia, Canada and the US, they have raised serious questions as to ownership of rights to the oil resources between the federal and the state governments of research. Just as the same problems that Sabah and Sarawak is having with the federal government, the other federal constitutions also face the same problem. The states are saying, hey, this is my land, you got no right to take it. And as I told you earlier in the introduction, that in the United States, it is so very strictly compartmentalized between state powers and the federal powers. In New South Wales and the Commonwealth, Australian case, a consequence of creation of the Commonwealth under the Constitution and the grant of power with respect to external affairs vested in the Commonwealth any proprietary rights and legislative power. It was a Commonwealth, it was a federation, Australia, and it went on the basis like oil exploration, everything comes under external affairs. External affairs in every sovereign country is vested in the federation. It is an essential function of the federation and not the component states to protect and control the area of the marginal seas, the seabed and airspace and the continental shelf. That was the argument in the New South Wales case, because New South Wales was claiming sovereign rights, and the courts held that you do not have sovereign rights, it belongs to the Commonwealth. Any rights or powers which former colonies of Australia had in the territorial seas or in the continental shelf became vested in the Australian Commonwealth, the federal government. Even though you had sovereign rights before coming into the federation, it belonged to. Moving on to states, US and the California, among other reasons for rejecting California's claims that it came into the union with control over the offshore self, something like Sabah and Sarawak, they went into the federation on that basis. And this was the argument. There was nothing to suggest that the Crown ever relinquished such control to the colonies. The Crown is the British Crown. As you know, all the colonies in America, once upon a time, the sovereign rights were vested in the Crown. And so nothing to suggest that the Crown ever relinquished such control to the colonies. We can also ask ourselves the same question. Even if it had done so, powers over matters affecting foreign affairs passed to the federal government. Again, they considered exploring, exploitation, everything as coming under foreign affairs. The federation. Next case, US and California. The court in rejecting Louisiana's claim used again the foreign affairs argument advanced in the California case. In the US and Texas, Texas said in 1986 it became independent of Mexico, and before it joined the Union, United States, it had actual control of offshore areas up to 9 miles from the low